Morning, everyone. Speaking of seasons, as we wrap up Q3 of the year, it's hard to believe. And we're celebrating the arrival of fall. So we're really pleased to have you all join us today. We're going to be talking about a couple of topics with our guests today. We asked Josh to share one of his favorite, most meaningful quotes with us, and this would be it. Josh, you want to say anything about this quote, about why you chose it?
Well, I think I'll probably link it into our conversation later, but you'll hear
Okay.
through my story. I'm a D&I guy at my heart, and I know that the ways that we show up as leaders and human resources and just leaders in the world, every comment, every interaction means something, and it can go in all kinds of directions. And so as we think about the work that I'll share with you today that we're taking up, I think we see evidence of that and how important our roles as HR leaders are in impacting our organizations, individuals, and our communities.
Great. Thanks. Okay, so Zeta, let's get rolling. We want to make the most of our time together. Um, I want to welcome all of our members of the I4CP community. For those of you who are not from organizations that are members, welcome. This is a regular get-together that I4CP hosts for the development and education and enlightenment and just connectivity of the talent community at large. If you're not familiar with I4CP, we're a research organization, and we focus primarily our research on the practices of high-performance organizations. So with every study that we do, we certainly look at all of the data that we pull in, but then we filter that data more finely and take a look at what is it that companies that are really out there blazing trails and leading the pack, what is it that they're doing differently? And so we define high-performance organizations as those that excel in these 4 key areas. This is just a snapshot of, I like to call this the constellation of members within the I4CP community. Our research is completely independent. One of our colleagues, Kevin Martin, says it's pure research. It is pure research. It's not underwritten by any vendors or consultants. The data is what the data is, but our members certainly drive the topics and the subjects that we dig into week to week, month to month throughout the year. Next up. Okay, so my name is Lorrie Lykins. I'm the Vice President of Research here at I4CP. I'm standing in for Tom Stone, who is on the road today, and I am joined by my colleague, Beanie Turner, who's the Vice President of our Executive Search business here at I4CP. Here's just a quick reminder of the upcoming topics and guests that we have for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about hybrid work, the ongoing challenges and pain, and also wonderful things about hybrid work, strategic HR, and a lot of other really interesting topics related to talent management in this current environment. Okay, what's next?
And speaking of research, Lorrie, one of the things that I wanted to highlight today is we just launched a study on talent acquisition technology. And for those of you on this call, we are asking for you to and participate, right? This survey seeks to understand how satisfied users are with the various platforms in use, from sourcing to assessments to CRM and more. So speaking of, unbiased research, right? It is what it is, Lorrie. So we invite you to participate, complete the survey, and you'll receive real-time access to the results.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the key things. And Zeta put it in the chat. Yeah, Lorrie.
Yes, great. So I was going to say the link should be in the chat. I sit with our talent acquisition board, and we make time every time we get together to talk about tech stack. Again, a source of pain and angst, but also, hey, here's something great that works. So we're talking TA tech all day long. So if you are involved in the selection of your TA technology, if your company has just rolled out something new, if you have insight into what's going on with your TA technology in your organization, please take that survey or pass the link along to whomever in your organization is the right person to take it. And the link that we provided here gives you instant instant results. So you can see what the data is looking like in real time, which is pretty cool. The other link we have here is our brand new report that we just rolled out. It's all about generative AI, how organizations are adopting it, and how organizations maybe are still waiting on the sidelines to sort of dip their toe into it. So we have an executive brief that's available to non-members, and then the full report with all the analysis and the case studies that we put together. With almost 100 interviews that we did, the qualitative research is as rich and dense as the quantitative data. So really important report, really up to the minute of what is happening with AI. Okay, and without further ado, I want to introduce my neighbor in some ways, fellow Pittsburgher, Joshua Stewart. He's the Senior Vice President and Head of Talent Acquisition and Outreach at PNC Bank. Josh, welcome. Good morning. Hi, thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. I'm feeling the fall vibes in Pittsburgh, Lorrie. I don't
Yes.
know about you. It feels good. I get to look at the kind of changing hillside. I heard on the news this morning that the fall colors are coming, so it's a good day in Pittsburgh.
It is. It is. And so we invited Josh today to talk to us about a really, really important program that PNC is really well known for in this part of the country. And I think one of the most important messages of PartnerUp, and Josh is going to go over that with us, is that not everybody's going to go to college or needs to go to college, or maybe doesn't want to go to college, and that's okay. And there's a lot of other choices and options. And this is one of the, I think, just most important messages of PartnerUp. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about PNC. I know the roots in Pittsburgh go back to the 1850s. So your company's like, what, 170, 180 years old? That's quite a
Yeah,
lot.
you've got it. You got the research down. I love it.
Yeah.
And you're right. PNC has been around a long time, and certainly in the last decade, two has changed pretty dramatically in what we look like and where we are. Now we are one of the largest financial services organizations in the country. We are growing into our Southwest. We recently, within the last few years here, acquired an organization called BBVA, or their U.S. Affiliate of BBVA, which is a Spanish-owned bank. And that brought us into new spaces, new markets. And so if you're sitting in California today and saying, I don't know that PNC sounds so familiar, we're newish to your market in terms of our retail presence, but our corporate bank has been kind of coast to coast for many years. And we are absolutely growing and learning about our new markets. We are headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've got a lot of our team here, a lot of our human resources team is here, but as we grow, so is the representations and geographies of even where our HR colleagues sit. I lead talent acquisition and outreach for the firm. I've been here for just over 20 years. And I'll share with you this piece because it's actually important to PartnerUp. I started here as a call center agent, actually doing outbound sales, making those telephone calls to folks and talking about refinancing home equity loans. And 20 years later, kind of leading in HR, and we'll link all those pieces of those stories together as we think about PartnerUp. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it and what this organization, how this organization is thinking about early career talent.
So you are the epitome of a success story in terms of internal movement in an organization. That's really cool, Josh.
It's been a journey. I didn't set out to be a banker, honestly. I was at the University of Pittsburgh with the goal of being a pediatrician. And as you see, I'm not. There's no babies in the office. There's none of that pediatrics going on in here. But it took me a while to realize that what I was after was really at the core about caring for people. And I can live that out every day here in this organization, and certainly through the way we think about talent and talent development.
I think that's the one thing that every one of us on this call today probably has in common. We all took very different paths, but at the core of it, it's all about the mission of helping others. So before we get into the details of PartnerUp, we wanted to just do a quick poll and get a feel for where everybody is on the call. And that is, does your company engage in outreach with high school students? So is your talent pool, is your talent pipeline extending out into the high schools in your community? My guess, my hypothesis is that probably not all that common, but I don't know. Josh, you can probably tell us that.
Yeah, we see a little bit. Certainly, there's lots of organizations that are focused in volunteerism, connecting into their communities, and sometimes that looks like work in high schools. I think what you'll hear from us is, as a differentiator, is then that next step in accountability and intentionality about making those links to say it's not just about going to the schools and being a mentor, which is important, but then also delivering on the promise or the outcomes of hiring.
Okay. Pretty interesting. So some of you definitely are doing outreach into high schools. That's great to see.
That is great. I know that in a recent kind of peer group meeting, there was some discussion about even brand work that starts in high schools, getting into schools, and in the case of this roundtable, talking about banking. It may not be top of mind for all high school students to I'm going to work at a bank or understand really all the things that can happen there. And so there's work to be done in terms of unpacking that for students and creating connections between the studies that they do and their future careers and aspirations.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk about PartnerUp. We want to hear all about it. And I think the most important thing that I'm hoping everyone on this call gets from this time with you, Josh, is really some ideas and inspiration and energy. If they're not doing something like this in their own organizations, in their communities, just get some ideas on how to get rolling with this. So tell us your PartnerUp story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can go to the next slide, and I won't read it to you, but you can kind of see the mission statement there, what this is really all about. And I'll take you on a little bit of a journey of how this all got started. Here in the Pittsburgh region, there's an organization called the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. They have a number of focus areas, and one for a long time has been talent. And about, I think it was 2017, I could be off by a year there, they commissioned a study in partnership with Burning Glass to really understand the region, what was happening here relative to talent and skills gaps and active job opportunities and careers, et cetera. And it produced a report called the Inflection Point. And that was later updated kind of in a 2.0 a few years later. But one of the core findings in the initial report was to share that this region will be short on talent that we need just to sustain kind of the jobs that are already here. Maybe a little bit of a leaner understanding of what's coming, but using real-time data to say, projecting forward, will there be enough talent here? And the answer was no. And then the number that they had ascribed was an 80,000 person shortage. At the time, our CEO was chairman of that organization, and was very much part of those conversations. Came back to us to start questioning and asking some thoughtful and probing questions about what we were doing in early career talent. And I think PNC has a long story about what we've done in early career talent relative to college hires. So we have for a very long time, a very robust internship program, a very robust development program. We hire now about 550 summer interns all over the country, about the same number of full-time rotational development associates that are in rotational kind of year-long or multi-year development experiences. Again, all focused on recent college grads. But had not necessarily been intentional in thinking about high school. And his questions were, pointed towards, well, there's lots of opportunities here that are early career that may not require that college degree. And in fact, we had done that work several years prior to inspect job descriptions and create language that was inclusive of experience and or degree. And so some of the framework was there, but we weren't, thinking about it as a talent segment. So that really was the ask. And on the next slide, you'll kind of see where we went in terms of a little bit of a timeline. So we started by bringing together superintendents in the region, a couple superintendents, a couple employer partners, a few nonprofits, and others to say, well, we share this. Talent is a regional asset to be not consumed by one employer, but to be shared and to be developed and grown as an organization or as a region. And so with kind of that framework, what can we do together? And so we used the resources of our design thinking team, and they kind of lots and lots of post-it notes later, lots of journey mapping later, and persona creation and all kinds of fun things. What we ultimately wind up with PartnerUp. Now, at the time, it didn't have a name. It was actually harder to pick out the name than it was to create the program. It took us a long time to identify that right name. For a while, it was called the High School Collaborative, very functional name. But what we said is, we think we can go into schools together and talk about opportunities together, because whatever industry you are in this region, we have opportunities, and students may not understand them or know how to access them. It's very difficult to navigate it sometimes as an adult, let alone someone in just graduating from high school. And so we came back as a PNC team and have created a curriculum, which we'll talk about in a second, where we actually go into schools throughout the course of the year, teach a career development curriculum, not specific to any one particular job, but in career readiness, soft skills, understanding the job market, using tools like strength finders so that students can really identify their core strengths. And then ultimately, as we get towards the end of the program, and we'll talk through that, is hire the students. That is the goal. This was not about going into the schools, sharing opportunities, and leaving. I think we heard from the schools in that collaborative first session. That is often the case. There is lots of interest in high school talent, but not a lot of follow through relative to careers. And so we finished up this kind of design thinking exercise and then launched the program in Pittsburgh here with I think it was, and Brianna McMeekin is the individual that leads the program for us, and she listens to this, she'll tell me that I probably got it wrong, but it was something like 5 schools, 3 employers, and now we're much larger than that. Then after we really expanded to a point, we were 30 plus schools in the Pittsburgh region. We felt like we had our feet underneath of us, knew what we were doing here, and started to think about expansion. And so in 2021, we expanded into Cleveland, the full program. There we are working primarily with Cleveland Metro School District, which has 30 or so high schools. And so it was the equivalent kind of in the greater Pittsburgh region, like there's 30 school districts that kind of make up that similar size. And so we're in one school district with the same number of schools. And then as we move into 2023, 2024 school year, we're in that one now, excited to share that we are expanding into Birmingham, Alabama. These are all PNC footprint markets where we know, as we own, if you will, the curriculum, facilitate the curriculum, send our employees into the classroom. But when we do, we're representing PartnerUp. We don't go into the classroom as PNC being the dominant voice. We're talking on behalf of the other employers in the region and helping them to connect with talent. So that has grown pretty significantly since our launch there in 2017. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this next slide gives us some of those numbers so we can get a point of view on the growth. Yeah, so now if we look at all the markets, now this wouldn't include Birmingham because we're just there now. So Cleveland and Pittsburgh combined, we're in 65 high schools. Here in Pittsburgh, there's a core group. We actually have a kind of a partnership in a neighboring county where another employer is leading the charge on PartnerUp using our curriculum. And so we include that in the count here as well. 18 employers and multiple community partners. We were incredibly reliant on our community partners, especially at the beginning when we're in a new market, to understand What is the landscape of school districts here? Why are these school districts different than other school districts? What are the needs? What are the funding? What is the state requirements for career readiness for students? And how can we as an organization help the districts deliver kind of on some of those requirements that they may be looking at? In Pennsylvania, this was the case, new career standards that were delivered to the school districts as part of a requirement in student education, but not always resources about how to deliver that. So we develop our curriculum against those standards. So we then show up as adding value, helping you to accomplish kind of what needs to be done for and sometimes state requirements. So that gives you the whole landscape of how we've impacted. Nonprofit partners have helped us to do that translation. We have found very mightily that schools don't speak the same language as companies. Companies don't speak the same language as schools. And what we didn't want to do is show up and say, we're here now and we're going to fix this for you, because that's not the case. And so I remember those very first meetings. We would go in, Brianna and I, into a school district, generally the superintendent and maybe the high school principal and maybe a curriculum point of contact. And we would say the first question is, help us understand why this school is different. What are the strengths of this school? Why are your students prepared in a different way for careers than another school? And as we think about a partnership, what do you need? We got the sense that in the past, employers have come forward and said, here's what you're not doing. There's a lot of conversations about what you're not doing and what students aren't ready for and the gaps. And that doesn't feel good for our educators who are working tirelessly to meet their requirements, to educate the students and prepare them for the next step. And so our goal was not to point, but to build bridges on how we close some of those gaps. Wow. So who are we talking about when we talk about these students? What we do in the schools, I'll give you a little bit of a functional view of what this looks like. So you can think about how you might approach something in your markets in a similar way. We're talking about students who have expressly identified that they don't want to go to college as their next step. And that could be for a number of reasons. They're not interested in it. Academically, they don't feel like it's the next best step for them. They can't afford it. Or perhaps they can, but they don't have the resources or even the cultural context around them to show them the next steps of how to then go and do that. And so sometimes the school counselors or the teachers would say, well, they said that that's their plan, but here we are in their senior year and they've not even done a school visit or submitted an application or started the FAFSA. So there's signals to us that if that's happening, it might not happen right away. And so we partner with the schools. We have one kind of PartnerUp liaison lead in the schools generally to help us identify the right students to participate in the cohort. Generally, it's 30 students is our goal in every school district. And there is an application process. We learned that in the first year. This is not a place where we're just, we're not sure what to do with these students, so let's put them in PartnerUp. No, the students have to write an essay. They have to apply. And we let the school pick, right? So we don't sit in the seat and go, that wasn't a very good essay. I don't think so. No, we get that responsibility to the school, and then we ultimately can get great kids in these cohorts. Then what happens is we go, and on our next slide, you can kind of see visually what this looks like. We go into the schools and we teach this curriculum that we have created, and this is this engagement bar. It starts in September, goes all the way through March. It's 7 or so 2-hour workshops. Students are pulled out of their daily curriculum and put in to the PartnerUp experience once a month. And we'll have another slide here in a second where you can see what the outlines of these workshops look like. But it's led by PNC. We invite the other employers into the classroom at certain points. They don't always need to be there. We know that's a resource constraints. But we're talking about the employment opportunities that are available, make that very real to them. We're talking about benefits. So there's a bit of a kind of a recruiting piece of this. But then we jump right into tools like Strength Finders. So let's do this assessment together. Let's give you a language where you can talk about your strengths. Imagine this cohort is not necessarily the group in school that is way out front academically or way behind. And so this is a group that maybe is not sure how to talk about their strengths, their experiences. They don't get the same amount of attention, be it kind of positive or negative. And so they miss that language. And so we're saying things like, so tell us about an experience you had. And we start to prep them for this kind of behavioral interviewing. And sometimes they say, I don't know, I've never had that. So we have to kind of draw it out and say, do you babysit? Tell me about that. Or in your friend group, are you the one always fixing problems? Tell me about that. And then how might we turn that around and use language to say that's something that you're good at, and what words would I use to describe that? And so we kind of go through this iteration of translation with them so that when they get to the end of the program, and which is kind of February, March, they are ready to go. In February, we're again showing them the opportunities in the region. We're again giving them the tools to apply, and they apply. And we do interview prep, video interview prep, in-person interview prep, all kinds of things. And about the April timeframe, we bring all the employers together in one giant super day, and we interview. In 24 hours, the commitment is you're turning around offers. So they've got offers in hand before they're walking across the graduation stage. And we ask the schools at graduation, which is usually a month or so later, to say, when this person comes across the stage and we say, and this person's going to this university, and this person is going into the military, you need to say, and this person has accepted an offer at PNC, and this person has accepted an offer at Giant Eagle, because we have to say that is equally important to choose career. And most schools do that. We also then have a signing day, similar to sports signing days you're familiar with. And so we give, for the case of PNC, orange caps and hoodies and all of the things, and you're signing your offer letter. We don't normally require that, but we bring friends and family. We got the PNC backdrop, and it creates kind of an event for the school to celebrate this intentional choice of moving into career.
Oh, that's great.
And then this is the enable phase, where it looks different from every employer to employer to employer. At PNC, students join our HR community for the first 60 days, helping them to transition into a very corporate. Imagine walking high school hallways to very corporate hallways, very different. And so we then partner with an academic organization, and while they're here with us, they're spending part of their time there, earning their first 3 college credits, so they can see what college is like if that's interesting to them. We use our tuition reimbursement program to cover that, and then 60 days later, they've got college credits, they've had a transition program, lots of resources, and then they're launched into their roles. And so that's the full architecture. And then on the last slide here is the curriculum. I'll just leave that on the screen so you can take a look at what we're talking about and when. But I'll pause. It's a lot of information. There's much, much more to unpack and share about all the lessons we've learned. And I'm happy to go there too. But Lorrie, I'll take a pause. What do you think?
I'm blown away, but I think we've got some really fabulous questions in the chat. Mimi, you want to take the mic?
Yeah, sounds good. Josh, we have a question from Kelly Cantrell. Hi, Kelly. Good to see your name. Do some students sometimes decide at some point that they want to go to college? How do you support them if this is their decision?
That's a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. We have lots of these conversations. In fact, twice now we've had the valedictorian in the PartnerUp cohort at particular schools, because they're trying to figure out whether they want to do career or college. And sometimes they're having hard conversations at home, trying to say, hey, I want to go to career. And that's a hard, sometimes bias to overcome, not just at home, but generally. And so we see that going in both directions. Lots of students get to the end of the program and realize college is the next step, and that's okay. We're not here to just serve the outcome of hiring. Certainly we want to hire. That's great. But if you see what's offered kind of an early career, and you're interacting with lots of organizations through this program, and that's the better path or the right path for you, awesome. But for us, that's a recruiting pipeline. Now they know who we are. I know that they're walking out with that resume. They're walking out with those interview skills. They're going to serve them in a college interview, going to serve them in a college application. And it becomes difficult in a way to establish an ROI on this program that is as big as it is, because we see students years later that come back and tell us all the things that they've done using the tools that we've given them that wasn't necessarily finding a job at PNC. We also find students, if let's say there's percentages around this in the inflection report, but the percentage of students who go to first year college, decide that's not for them, and then pull out, that's another group of students that becomes very confusing. What do I do? I kind of had a little bit of a false start. Generally, they go back to their schools. They're talking to guidance counselors as a resource. And we find guidance counselors calling us and say, do you remember so-and-so? Or maybe you didn't meet so-and-so, but now that they have a connection with us, what kind of opportunities do you have? because we think so highly of this individual. So it's creating a connection, a recruiting pipeline that maybe was a little unexpected.
Josh, the other question I have is, I know that you have many, many partners in this. What other, I heard you say Giant Eagle, which is a big supermarket in this part of the country, but what other industries are partnering with you on this initiative?
We have, especially robust in Cleveland. We've got 3, maybe 4 healthcare partners. A lot of students are interested in healthcare. We've got in Cleveland as well a lot of the trades represented. So we've got an electric organization and others. I've kind of lost track a little bit. We've got service industry covered. We've got financial service. Financial services ends up being an interesting sell. When we do that first kind of initial intake, so tell us the things that you're interested in. Generally, financial services is not at the top of the list because of perceptions of access, perceptions of what that is, that maybe I have to have a degree kind of thing. My context, my world around me maybe has a little bit of a different point of view on financial services and banking. So that it's probably more of an uphill battle for us in terms of brand and connection. But when we get to the end, generally, we get more than our fair share of applicants. And what's interesting to me in that we ask why. Why is that the case? How did you get from like never do I want to work at a bank to you're my number 1 pick? It's the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's the trust. It's that we've seen you every month for 2 hours. You're working to understand me. I feel like you've got my back. You've built a bridge here, and I know who to call, which is for the same reason why we say to all the employers who are involved, come as much as you can. When you can't, we're there, and we will answer to the degree that we can about your organizations, and we'll find out the answers when we're not there. But the more you're there, the better your outcomes. So yeah, lots of industry represented. I don't know yet what that looks like in Birmingham. I think we're still in conversations with identifying the right employer partners. To be an employer partner for us, I think it's a good point is not to disparage maybe retail jobs or hourly jobs. And some of the jobs that we offer are hourly, certainly, but we require that to be a PartnerUp employer, you have to demonstrate to us a couple of things. 1, you have to offer full-time benefits. 2, one of your benefits has to be tuition reimbursement or something like it for continuing education and development, because this is not about dead-ending students. 3, your HR organization has to demonstrate the rigor and flexibility required to work through this. It is challenging to 1, commit the resources to be in the classroom, but 2, when they start applying, making sure you're the care, the connection, the follow through, the flexibility with, oh my gosh, they only want to text me, or all the stereotypes come out. If you can't quite kind of bridge some of those biases and gaps, you won't be successful. We learned a lot about our processes to make sure they're as inclusive as possible. And so we meet with employers weekly to say, hey, what are you doing? How do you get ready? Like some simple stuff. Like, don't say, oh yeah, just go on our website and Google or search teller and apply for what comes up. That would be very hard. And so we say, make one evergreen. We have a job profile that we use called an early career transition associate. And we use that. We've shared that with other employers and said, use that. We don't care, use that. And then use it to field the applicants into one place and then launch them into their identified career. So there's lots of HR tips and tricks. And so we need that agility from employers. And the last thing is, and probably the hardest actually, is anticipating and holding jobs. You have to demonstrate to me that we're not going to get to April and you're going to say, man, we don't have anything. So we can't commit to 9 months of conversation about your opportunities, and then there are none. And so similar to an intern program or a development program or something, you got to have lots of internal conversations about holding seats, protecting seats, anticipating seats, whatever it is, so that there is space for these individuals when the hiring time comes.
I bet that could get a little dicey sometimes.
it's not the easiest. We have built a lot of practice around our college hire because this is how we do college hiring. And
Yeah.
so generally kind of we're anticipating kind of that hiring way out. And so we've in many lines of business added this as part of the conversation. So, okay, you've told me you want X interns, and how many PartnerUp associates should we be putting there as well?
Lorrie and Josh, there's one more comment or question from Kelly since you're on this slide. Right here in session 4, he was curious to know, the power skills. Could you describe that versus the strengths discussion in session 2?
Yeah. Power skills, we didn't coin this. I think it's heard in other spaces, is synonymous for the most part to soft skills. There's nothing soft about the skills that we're talking about here. And when we're talking to this cohort, we reframe it as power skills. And so we're thinking about things like teamwork, communication skills, professionalism. Some of these, I think there's 4 or 5 that we go through in the program. And so that's what we're calling power skills. And they're called power skills because if you can demonstrate them, then you got the power in the interview and in your kind of future career trajectory. Your organizations that we're putting in front of you, they're going to teach you banking. They're going to teach you healthcare. But if you don't show up to work, you don't show the capacity to kind of grit and learn and be a learner and navigate and some of the professional things, then that all falls apart. And so let's focus on this core stuff first. And then most of the organizations with us are going to build kind of those hard skills on top of that. So we call them power skills. Strengths Finder, a specific Gallup tool, right? And that gives you then your output of 5, or you can see all 34, but 5 of your core strengths. And so for me, for a student, to use language like I'm a maximizer, which is one of the the strengths, and explain what that means in real context is very powerful in an interview. Generally, when we get our business leaders together for this super day from our organization and others, the first reaction is like, I'm blown away. I'm blown away by these students and the skill and what they're bringing forward and how they're talking about themselves. We've never had, in all these years now of doing this, a debrief hiring conversation with hiring managers where they go like, I don't know. Generally, we see the students may have applied to multiple roles in one organization. So there's a very sometimes contentious conversation like, no, she said she liked this job. Well, no. And then my interview said she liked this job. Well, I want her, right? It's one of those like competing now for talent, which is really interesting to observe because we overcome a lot of biases about what they think it means to hire directly out of high school.
Josh, I can't help but think about some of the research that we've done on employee resource groups, ERGs and BRGs, and understanding that, raising your hand to function as a volunteer leader in these groups, a lot of times these are people who are super talented, but for whatever reason, they may have been overlooked in the traditional high potential identification process. But just that experience of being seen, being recognized, is just huge for engagement, for advancement opportunities, retention. But I'm also thinking about everything we've learned since the pandemic started about mental health and wellness and well-being. I don't know what sort of metrics you have with PartnerUp, but I can only imagine that the employees that are coming into PNC through PartnerUp have got to probably have better numbers in terms of engagement and well-being and retention.
Retention, absolutely. So we always are doing a look back, kind of looking at the retention of the cohort relative to peers in similar roles. And retention is much greater in all roles, with the exception of the first year. The first year, I mean, every year is tough. The first year we had a lot to learn. We didn't hire that many. Now we're at the point, like I think this year we hired 40, 45, something like that, between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. In the first year, I think it might have been 10, maybe a few less than 10. And we only have 2 of those 10 left. Now we're talking, we're 5 years out from that. So, I'm not sure what we expected necessarily, but for the 2 that are still here, they've gone on to have 3 and 4 promotions. and doing all kinds of things. Actually, one is in our campus recruiting organization because he wanted to participate in kind of what he saw as what benefited him. Another has moved into our retail organization, et cetera. But back to your question, retention is better. But where we missed it between year 1 and 2, where we had to grow, was that 60-day program. And I think that got amplified. The need for it got amplified through COVID. So, it's that high school hallways to corporate hallways thing. Let me give you an anecdote. One day, one of the they very proudly refer to themselves as the ECTAs when they're here for their first 60 days, the Early Career Transition Associates. We actually had one of them stand up on HR town hall and say to the CEO, I'm an ECTA. He said, great, what is that? And she said, the high school program, and he adores the high school program. He meets with them for lunch on occasion, and we've all kinds of interactions between the cohort and him. And so I recall one of these analysts or associates walking through the hallway and was wearing a suit. And someone on this floor, on the HR floor, and someone said, oh my gosh, you look so great today. Look at that suit, right? And he was, thrilled by that. The next day, he wasn't wearing a suit. And the same person walked by and didn't say anything. I see him later, and he's looking a little dejected. And I said, he comes to the office, I said, what's going on? And he said, man, I don't know her name, but I think she's mad at me. I did something wrong. And I said, what do you mean? She said, yesterday, she was complimenting my suit, and today she didn't even say good morning, and I don't know what I did. And I said to the gentleman, I said, she stopped you in the hallway because she liked your suit and she thought you looked awesome. Because she didn't say anything doesn't mean she doesn't think you're awesome or she doesn't like what you're wearing. Today, it didn't change that much. And he paused and he went, well, that's not what it's like in high school. Because someone who doesn't talk to you from day 1 to day 2, that's a dig. They're probably walking past you and talking about you. I was like, that's not what this is. And so there's lots of those conversations that happen. We have a lot of students that are now professionals that join us in that first 60 days are working through stuff that they felt like they couldn't safely work through in school. And so we have the woman who runs the program is a licensed counselor. She uses that toolkit a lot to meet with them, understand what's going on, manage the dynamics between 25 just recently graduated high schoolers from all different kinds of districts from all around the city, now in 60 days sitting in a very large conference room together, trying to figure it out.
Wow.
So there's a lot to do, but when you invest in it, and it's hard, there's a lot of tears, more the tears of the people helping this program in the program, because it's sometimes it's long days, and not because it's bad, because emotionally to take it in and help these students navigate can take a toll.
I bet. But at the same time, it must be unbelievably rewarding, Josh,
Yeah, very much so. Very
Um,
much so.
okay, so how are we doing on time? I want to make sure that we have a few minutes for Josh to share a little bit with us about the accessibility initiatives at PNC. And I know you have a C-level accessibility officer at PNC, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that it dawned on me, Lorrie, until I started, and maybe 45 minutes ago, we were talking about the design team. We use the same resources. What we were finding in HR is that there was a lot of individuals in HR raising their hand, kind of individually, and saying, I think we can do better relative to inclusion for individuals with disabilities. Here I am in employee relations or recruiting or wherever the COE was, and they're saying something. And so one of our leaders brought kind of a committee together and said, how can we do some of this low-hanging fruit stuff together? We did that. I ended up kind of leading the like a committee, so to speak. One of the recommendations is this isn't just a bunch of volunteer. We all have to do it. But we actually need some centralization of this. And so through that effort, the recommendation was to hire an accessibility officer. We engaged the design thinking team again, that internal innovation team, lots of post notes, lots of journey writing, all kinds of things. We created magazine covers of what we would look like in 5 years from now, and said, who is PNC in the lane of accessibility? Because there's a lot of things to choose from. Do you want to be known for inclusion of a particular disabilities because you get really good at it, or more broadly, what is this? And so we defined it, and again, one of the outcomes was needing to create a team around it. And so that organization ended up being part of my organization. We hired an accessibility officer to lead the charge. Since then, we have a second person in that seat who's now kind of was a peer for me because the team is growing. It's inclusive of a couple of folks on the team who are kind of accessibility analysts, inclusive of sign language, in-house sign language interpreting resources, and we're moving kind of an enterprise-wide strategy from employee to customer about accessibility. As we have learned very quickly, it's hard work. I think we didn't doubt that it was hard work, but as you kind of get into it, there's a lot to do. And excitedly, we are certainly participative in things like the DEI index and all the things and scoring the high marks, but it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of opportunity to continue to strengthen what we do in accessibility. So equally as exciting, similar roots, kind of we see a problem, we design around a problem, we figure out what the PNC vision for that is going to be, and then implement it. And now we're kind of on a similar, maybe 5 or so years since we started that.
Yeah, and there's just such a tremendous amount of learning to do when you're undertaking that work. A lot of cultural nuances. And Josh, I just want to compliment you because I know that your second language is American Sign Language. And it's so great to have a talent leader who's walking the talk about accessibility. And I just think that's really admirable. So
Thank you very much. Our first accessibility officer was deaf and hard of hearing, and it felt critical to me to close communication gaps. And so I went and learned. Of course, you lose it when you don't use it every day, but as much as I can, we use it. And we've created, using that example, connecting the dots, right? Because it was kind of like, what is this thing that Josh has got going? He's got campus recruiting, he's got accessibility, he's got this high school stuff. It's this weird mix. My role has since changed into the one that it is now. But at the time we said, let's work at that intersection. And so we created really powerful partnerships with Gallaudet University, the National Technical Institute of the Deaf, as target schools for early career hiring. And we do a lot of hiring out of those schools. And in fact, next week, they have us on their corporate advisory board now. I just got an email. It sort of popped up on the corner while we were talking that the meeting is next week. And so lending our voice and influence to how we can get focused on hiring individuals with disabilities.
wow. So you are not a busy guy at all.
Or to tears.
So I'm going to pass the baton to Mimi. Wow, this time has really flown by.
Just a reminder for those of you joining us today, learning credits are granted if you are also looking for HRCI and SHRM credits here. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to email us. And the next slide, or we'll give this a minute. I know Zeta mentioned lots of folks like to jot down the program ID and details.
Gosh, you're a great teacher.
Excellent.
And yeah, I'll throw myself out there. Please feel free to reach out at any point. Happy to be a partner with you, whether you're in Fall, Pittsburgh, or anywhere else in the country. We do this well when we do it together. So appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you for offering, Josh. Wonderful resource. And for those of you who are looking forward to our next Practices Now conference, I joined I4CP earlier this year, and I went for the first time back in March of this year. And it was the first conference that I had ever gone to in my entire career that did not have vendors at the conference, which meant that the discussions, right, the connections, and all the wonderful things that go on at this conference are with other peer practitioners, right, and other leaders in this human capital space. So for those of you on the call, I'd love to invite you to join us at our next Practices Now conference next year. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers, and if you'd like to learn more, you can follow the link here on the slide. Zeta will also drop it in the chat for us. And lastly, thank you. Thank you to Josh. Thank you to Lorrie for a wonderful discussion. And thank you to all of you for the wonderful questions as well in the chat. Lorrie, you want to take us home?
Just any final thoughts, Josh? Any words of inspiration to folks that maybe want to take this back to their teams and talk about maybe exploring this in their own organizations?
Yeah, I don't know. So sometimes it feels overwhelming. The resources around it feels overwhelming. The investment feels overwhelming. I will tell you, if you can get there with your organizations, it's more than worth it. But do the homework first, the groundwork first, the building the frameworks of accessibility and job profiles, whether you're talking about accessibility as accessibility or accessibility in terms of job requirements, all things included in DE&I world. Build it from the ground up. Use the resources that are meaningful to your organization. I implore you to do it as partners, especially the high school work, and not, schools don't have resources to fend off, if you will, or welcome even on the more positive way, 30 employers. They don't have career services offices. So the degree that we as a community can make this easy is the degree that we can access this talent. But if we're all kind of in it for our own devices, then it just doesn't work, and it feels harder than it necessarily needs to be. I go back to that original quote. That's like, everything matters. Every moment, every interaction with a teacher, with a student, with a candidate with a disability matters. You have a huge impact. And if I could just swing my camera a little bit, I would share our team motto in talent acquisition and outreach is, what starts here changes everything. And so the talent that we bring to the organization, the experiences that we create for candidates, change their lives and our organization. I know that you're out there doing the same thing. So again, thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to connecting with some of you later.
Thank you so much, Josh. We really appreciate your gracious sharing of your time and your experiences. So thank you so much.